Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SoxProspects.com podcast, the web's number one source for information on the Boston Red Sox from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Worcester, across the Pike to Fenway, and all stops in between. Thank you for listening. My name is Ian Kundle. I'm the Director of Scouting at Sox Prospects. And this week, I'm joined by a good friend of the show and happy to have him back after a couple weeks off, Chris Clegg of the Dynasty Dugout. How you doing, Chris? Good to have you back on the pod after I looked, and it's been almost 2 months since we've talked about what you've been seeing down there.
Has it really been that long? That's
yeah, cool. Beginning of May. So it's great to have you back, though. I know things have been really busy with you. Everything good?
Yeah, time does go fast. We're at the halfway point of the minor league season at this point.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yep. And I had a baby 4 weeks ago today as we're recording this. So that's the reason for my absence. But 4 weeks has honestly flown by. And I really thought we had recorded like late May, but
well, on behalf of everyone at the site, congratulations. That's very exciting news. Glad to hear everyone's doing well. And hopefully you're sleeping enough that you can still go watch, Hayden Mullins and the Password hit home runs and enjoy it and not just think about dozing off in the crowd.
Getting enough sleep, enough to function. Not as much as I like, but enough.
I can imagine that. Well, before we go any further, if you enjoy the show, there's some ways that you can support us. First, spread the word, tell a friend, tell a relative, tell your newborn, because, you can never start them listening to the podcast too early. You can also help by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you listen. And finally, the Sox Prospects donation drive is live. Our goal is to raise $10,000 this year with your help. We've kept the site free for over 20 years now, and we hope to do so for the foreseeable future. Donation help cover costs in two primary areas: firsthand coverage of travel costs for scouting and general IT costs such as hardware, software, internet costs, and hosting fees. If you're interested in making a one-time donation, please head to soxprospects.com/donate. And finally, you can also support us on patreon.com. There you get some neat perks for your per episode pledge. And that's another way to support us. And finally, and of course, send your emails to podcast@soxprospects.com because we want to talk about what you want to hear about. All right, let's jump into it. We got a fun show today. I think we got a wide range of subjects to talk about. And to kick it off, just only really two major news items in the last couple of weeks. I think the bigger one, let's just start with that because that's more fun. Yohan Cespedes got promoted to Salem, as first reported by our own Chris Hatfield. I think everyone was waiting for this. And I know people were saying it was like long overdue. And I think they're forgetting that he didn't play at all in spring training, really. And then he missed most of extended spring training also. So I think part of why he spent, it was, his numbers look great. He was there for, I think, 25 games total. That was basically his spring training. He was still ramping up. He wasn't playing every day. He wasn't playing the field consistently. And I think that's largely why, even though his, offensive production was insane, it kind of took, a month and a bit to get him up to Salem. But now he's going to be at a level where I think is a really good test for him and kind of see how advanced is he at the plate, or what are the areas of game that he really needs to work on to take the next step in his development.
Yeah, he's been incredible to watch this year. And yeah, he was probably the most impressive player outside of the big three in spring training. Even though we didn't get to see a ton of him, we did see him in some live BPs, and man, the kid can hit. It's like, it's no shocker that he's hitting as good as he is at the complex. I mean, did it in the DSL last year. Like, the underlying data was really good. It's really good again this year. I mean, he gets easy loft. He can pull the ball, and there's plenty of power there. The kid's forearms and biceps are huge for an 18.
Yeah.
And he's short. Like, he's not tall.
No, he's 5'8", probably 5'9" at best.
But he's jacked. Like,
yeah,
very solid build. And, he can hit. He hits for contact. He's going to hit for power. I love the skill set overall. And I think just that profile is going to be a bat first. Like, obviously, I don't think we're looking at a shortstop long-term at all.
I was going to get onto that. The biggest, most consistent feedback I've got from scouts is the defense is a major work in progress. Like, he's not a shortstop at all. He might not be a second baseman. And it's a little concerning because it's tough to get shoehorned into probably left field as an 18-year-old.
Yep.
So hopefully he can kind of maintain some at his athleticism. Because as you said, the body is pretty maxed out already. He's very strong. He's well proportioned for his size, but you got to maintain that athleticism. So that's something I'll definitely be watching in Salem and kind of getting reports on is how's the defense look? Because that was the most interesting feedback I got was just there's no chance he's a shortstop, and second base could be difficult. So I think offensively, he's definitely, as you said, well ahead of his defense. But yeah, the overall skill sets, it's really exciting. And if we can kind of find a defensive home, tighten up the approach a little bit with his batted ball and kind of bat speed, it's insane bat speed. So it's a really, really fun prospect and adds to a Salem lineup that even with Miguel Bleis and Josh Nixon Garcia gone, pretty interesting with him and Zanatello at the top.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, like originally before Cespedes was scratch yesterday, I mean, you have the top of Zantello, Antonio Anderson, who's been hitting better of late, and Cespedes. That's a fun top three, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the struggles of Anderson, he's still, high draft pick last year, some pedigree, and I think he will come around. So
yeah, I mean, we'll talk about one later. We've seen those guys; they can turn it around pretty quickly. I'm looking at you, Cutter Coffee, who we'll discuss a little bit later. But yeah, no, it's definitely it's an interesting team, and they needed some bodies after losing those guys up to Greenville. So good to see him get that promotion, and then replacing him on the FCL. And I just briefly touch on this is because we got some questions. Is Jancel Santana, who was in the DSL, and I think that in his numbers are not very good. He was in the DSL for a third year, and I think when you look at a promotion like this, you got to just think about it in the context of the domestic reserve list. The FCL season has about a month left, and you don't want to push someone up now who, like, because you have to add them when you do that. You're not going to push a true prospect or someone that maybe a little aggressively at this point in the season. Santana, he could field. Like, that's what he's going to go there to do. So I don't, I wouldn't read too much into his promotion. I think it was more that he was probably the most adept fielder and someone that they needed a body, obviously, to replace Cespedes. The other big, not big. Can you count it at big at this point because it's Brian Mata? But Brian Mata's back rehabbing. Who knows? I mean, he has had a good couple of outings with Portland. I believe he's now up in Worcester. He's going to make a couple appearances there, and then they're going to have to decide. He's got his rehab clock stopped for about 3 weeks, so he's got a couple more weeks left. But I don't know. At this point, I need to see. I just have no confidence that he can stay healthy. Everything is just so stop and start with him, and we've run down before on past episodes his injury track record. That I'm going to need to. If he can get through an entire rehab assignment healthy, then we can think about what the ramifications are. But I still, until I see that, I don't know. For me, he's just another middle reliever right now rehabbing, and we'll wait and see what happens.
Yep. It's crazy he made it to Greenville in 2018. That's just wild to think about.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he made it high A in 2018, and we
Jeez.
still have not seen him in the majors. So
I mean, he's out of options. He still hasn't made his debut.
Yeah.
it's tough. I mean, it's just tough because the stuff is so electric, but I think it just shows how fickle pitching prospects can be with injuries. Like, your stuff can be incredible, and he's not the only one. We've seen this with a lot of guys, I feel like, that just have tantalizing stuff, but you just don't ever get consistency because of injuries. Yeah. And if he can put it together, I still think there is, major league bullpen upside, but it's just so hard to trust if you look at, I mean, can you guess when the last time he threw 100 innings in a season was? Without looking.
Pandemic, probably.
Yeah, 2019.
Jeez.
100 innings. That's not a high bar to clear.
Jeez.
So, I mean, it's just been a really rough road for him. But I mean, we'll see. Again, it's hard to say. He's going to get up to Worcester for the first time this year, crazily. So we'll see what the stuff looks like there. But as I said, I'm just kind of in a wait and see mode until we see him get, even closer to having to make that decision to get him to the majors. Speaking of the majors, are the Red Sox good?
Yeah. Much better than I thought they'd be preseason. I mean,
I think it's interesting that they for so long they were just yo-yoing between like one game over 500, one game under 500, 500, and it was just back and forth. And then all of a sudden they've gotten hot at the right time. They had a couple of really impressive series wins against the Phillies and the Yankees, and swept the Blue Jays 2-3 against Cincinnati. And all of a sudden, they've kind of created some distance between them and the rest of the teams chasing that third wild card spot. And I think they've actually grabbed a hold of the third wild card spot now, jumped the Royals. And it's interesting to me. What's interesting to me, and I saw this stat on Twitter yesterday, was I think the Red Sox have given up more than 3 runs for 16 straight games, and yet they have a winning record in that span. And it's kind of a reverse of what we saw earlier in the season when they were winning on the back of their pitching. Right now, they're winning even if their pitching isn't actually going well. And it's nice because the bats have just really come alive lately. I think, this has coincided with Jarren Duran having just an electric stretch. And we were talking about it before the show, but it's just crazy to me that he's on pace for almost a 7 WAR season. Like, I loved Jarren Duran as a prospect, but I did not think he was capable of this. I'll freely admit that. And obviously it's taken a while to get here. Like, that's the thing. But man, he's really fun to watch. And like David Hamilton is hitting, it's just, I guess it goes to show that at the end of the day, good offense can win you games. And it kind of makes me wonder that, once the Red Sox get Tristan Casas back, is this sustainable? Can they at least stay in the wild card hunt for the rest of the season? Because if they're doing this with the pitching kind of being more average-ish, which is closer to, I think, what people had expected heading into the season, then, if you have the offense, you can it gives you more of a margin for error. So I don't know what your thoughts are on the Red Sox kind of in general compared to the rest of Major League Baseball as we cross the halfway point of the season.
Yeah, it's been fun to follow for sure how they've been doing, and with a lot of the team beat up. I mean, Tristan Casas hasn't played in over 2 months at this point, and I think he's getting ready to start swinging again. So hopefully he's back, post All-Star break at some point, maybe closer to August. I'm not sure that timeline completely.
Yeah, he's going to need it. I cannot imagine that he doesn't go on at least like a 2-week rehab assignment. I don't know. Seems like an injury that you don't want to risk having any sort of setback or any sort of, you wait until it's fully healed. And then you kind of start going. But I think he said he wants to be back by, I think it was the All-Star break or something, or early July. But I mean, it's July's in less than a week and he's still out. He still hasn't started a rehab assignment, or even he just started swinging. So I think your timeline about like after the All-Star break probably sounds about right.
Yeah. Send him to Greenville for rehab, man. Greenville has the worst first base like duo in the country.
I mean, the Red Sox could use it. Like, if you look at their lineup right now, that's probably the biggest question mark to me, because they're getting healthy with the outfield is kind of back to what you expect with Abreu back. And then in the infield, David Hamilton, I think, is going to end up being the everyday second baseman. Well, they're kind of like platooning. Like, he'll play second base against righties and probably shortstop against lefties. But I mean, other than first base, I feel like that's really, and DH, which is a completely different discussion. Those are really the only 2 positions I feel like they're not getting the level of production you would look for. I think that, if you told me going in that this is what they get from Abreu, Duran, O'Neill in the outfield, I would have been thrilled. And then Rafaela he's hot and cold. This is what he is. You're going to go through stretches where I think Red Sox Stats, a good friend of the program, had a great one today that was like, in that hot stretch where he went nuclear for like 2 weeks, he had 25% of the hits he's had the entire season. And then he's like 1 for his last 18. That's just what it is. It's I was texting with someone in the game about it yesterday, and I just sent them, it's just a roller coaster, GIF, because that's his season. You're going to have highs and lows, and it's just going to go up and down, because that's just the type of player he is. When you have an approach like he does, it's just really hard to have sustained success against MLB pitching. So, but I mean, he's doing what he's needed to. Devers has been great. So it's getting interesting. Like, I think this is a team that has a chance to push for a wild card spot, and it's going to be fascinating to see what Craig Breslow does at the deadline, because Red Sox have been in this situation the last couple of seasons and kind of hedged and not really done anything in either direction. And I think especially with where they are 40-man wise heading into the offseason, they're going to have to do something. You need to either, and I think the approach I would recommend would be buy and sell, kind of like what the Brewers did last year. We probably trade Kenley Jansen, maybe one of the other guys who's on an expiring deal, but then also go out and get a cost-controlled reliever, go out and get a cost-controlled starter, and kind of try to make a run for that third wild card spot still, and kind of hedge in between, because it's the one thing you can't do nothing again. That's just, to me, that just makes no sense with the way the team is currently built.
Yeah, I agree. And they have the pieces. I mean, if you can make minor trades to make this MLB roster better, I think, with
Yeah.
giving up anything substantial, because there's so much depth in the system,
Yeah.
which is a nice thing to have at this point. Obviously, everybody knows the big names. If you're listening to the show, you probably know most of the names in the system, but there is a lot of depth that they can utilize, where if you want to add another starting pitcher, I don't think the Red Sox need to go add an ace.
No. And you're not paying what it's going to
Right.
take to get Garrett Crochet or something.
Exactly. It'd cost a fortune, but you can get a serviceable starter and maybe at a reasonable cost, not give up a ton, not gut the farm system by any means, and be more competitive. If you're still in a decent spot, come, 3 weeks from now, we're getting closer to the deadline. It's like, okay, like now's the time to make that move. I think the bullpen's been good. And we talked about this preseason, while the big names aren't there, like it's still been good. It's been a really good bullpen. Some of the guys, that came into the season not as well known have been good. So that's been good to see as well. Zach Kelly, obviously being back, is huge. He's pitched extremely well as of late.
He's been fantastic. Have you looked at his Savant page recently, by the way? It's
Just
literally just, he's above the 80th or 79th percentile on like everything but walk rate, barrel rate, and chase rate. Chase rate's like 62nd. Like his stuff, and it's something we've talked about. His stuff has been so good with the Red Sox. It's just always been health.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see him having this extended period of success when he's finally been given the chance and kind of grasp it. Because and you look at that bullpen, like they have beyond obviously the big two, or the guys at the end of the game, and Jansen and Martin are getting up there in age. The rest of the bullpen is pretty young in terms of baseball terms. You look at Weiser, Slayton, Kelly, even I know Bernardino's I think he's in his 30s, but in terms of baseball, he hasn't been in the big leagues that long. Like they have good, cheap, cost controlled options there. And I kind of think how you have to build an MLB bullpen these days is you need to get production from pre-arb guys. And then you have a couple of expensive, veterans on bigger deals for your late innings. And that's kind of what they have right now. And even if they were to move someone like Jansen or Martin, I do think they have the depth to be able to withstand that, given what they have, with up in the majors, and then also what they have coming from the high minors. With the Red Sox, actually, I'm curious your thoughts. I wanted to kind of have a little exercise where we talk about 4 players who I think have probably been the guys who have outperformed expectations the most this year. And this isn't not in order of them. It's just the order I listed them in. But I'm just curious about how sustainable do you think this is, these performances are, and kind of, are you buying, are you selling, or are you holding what they're doing right now? And the first one I want to talk about is Jarren Duran, because Jarren Duran, as mentioned earlier, is at 3.3 F4 right now in 80 games. So on pace for almost a 6.5, 7 more season. He's hitting 288, 351, 480, good for a 128 WRC plus. He has cut his strikeout rate by almost 3% this year. His walk rate is up 1.5%. His BABIP is actually down from last year, which I think was interesting, and he's always going to be someone who's going to run a high BABIP, but last year was 380, this year's 360. Like, I think that seems pretty sustainable. He's on pace for 30 plus steals. He's on pace for almost 15 home runs. Where are you at on Jarren Duran? Like, are you in on the hype, or do we think this is kind of what he is right now, and this is a guy who is a cornerstone, legit leadoff option in the major leagues for the foreseeable future?
And he looks the part, and I think the most interesting thing is that he's improved the glove a ton. Like, that's substantial to me. I would say he was certainly a below average fielder last year, but this year he has looked much better with the glove. And I think that's obviously of note that, he's been able to play some in center and obviously in left, split almost even time, a little more in left, but he's provided value, and he provided no value. Actually, it was a negative with the glove last year, to go with a really good bat too. And you look, and under the hood, it's like, all right, like there's definitely some sustainability here. He provides a lot of value with his legs, obviously on the base paths, and with the bat, it's like, All right. I've questioned, and I didn't know if what he did last year would even carry over, but here we are. He's getting on base a higher clip. The average is right in line. The slug's right in line with last year. Hitting for power, his hard hit rate's 80th percentile, barrel rate's at 60th percentile, average EV at 83rd percentile. It's pretty impressive. And I don't love the X stats, but they're all backing the performance. So I don't think we see a lot of batting average regression, anything of that nature. Not striking out a ton, making enough contact, like just become a well-rounded profile that's been really, really fun. He's hit all pitch types well, which is good. Breaking balls aren't giving him issues. He's hitting changeups extremely well and in murdering fastballs. So that's been a welcome sight. As he hit fastballs well last year, but we had seen some struggles early on in his pro career against them. Duran looks like he's coming to his own. He's 27. I think it's legit. It's hard to not buy in at this point.
Yeah, and I think what the point you made earlier about the defense is the most important thing, because with his how much he adds base running wise, and then even if he was doing the offensive production last year, let alone what he's doing this year, if he's going to be in the 95th percentile and outs above average and give you, plus defense to better in the outfield, what he was doing last year makes him a good player. Like what he's doing this year is what makes him a great player. And yeah, I agree. I mean, if you look at the expected, XBA, X slug, XW, OBA, like all of that is 75th percentile or higher. 282, 349, 459 is what they have for the expected numbers for that. Like everything under the hood seems sustainable. And his kind of breakout is just so massive for the Red Sox because it's given them he brings the speed and kind of athleticism to be a table setter that in the modern game is just so important. Alex Cora has constantly talked about athleticism. They want to be athletic. They want to play fast. And Jarren Duran is the one who sets the table. And I think his emergence and kind of developing into a team leader has just been so important to where they're doing. And I think, could we be seeing his career year? Maybe, but I still think that he is firmly established now as an everyday, top of the order hitter for the Red Sox. I think that is sustainable for the foreseeable future. So that's just a really, really encouraging development for them going forward. The next guy on my list is kind of been the I think the breakout pitcher. Would you say in all of baseball? Is that fair? Now that I'm trying to think of anyone else who's been, and I'm not talking about rookies, but talking about because Paul Skeens would probably be that because he might be the best pitcher in baseball already. But in terms of guys who we had a track record with in the majors, I'm having trouble coming up with anyone who's had a bigger breakout than Tanner Houck this year.
I mean, he leads all pitchers in baseball in WAR by 0.4. Like Fangraphs WAR, he is at 3.6. Garrett Crochet is the next highest at 3.2. I think he's the biggest breakout in baseball.
Oh, I guess Crochet probably is second now that we think about it. But I think they're different though, because Crochet, everyone knew he was nasty. It just was health.
Yeah.
Houck, I mean, and I'll freely admit, I was one, like I've said, I thought he was best suited for the bullpen. And I maintain, given what he was showing in the past, he was. But he's a different pitcher this year. And that's, I think, the thing that, when you're looking at past evaluations, especially like the last time I wrote him up was what, 2019, probably 2019, I guess, because he was he made his debut in 2020. But he's just a completely different pitcher. I mean, the where his splitter has got to was not something I could ever foresee, and I give Andrew Bailey a ton of credit for that. The way he's using his sinker and slider together, and the kind of the tweaks he's made with those two, have just turned him into this ground ball machine who also can miss bats. And when you have that combination from a really tough arm slot, that's that can play. And the fastball, it's interesting. I'm looking at the kind of the grades right now. The fastball grades out only it's still like a fringy pitch, or the sinker, I guess. But his breaking ball and splitter his breaking ball has always been great, but his splitter has gotten so good that he's able to overcome that. And he's one where I actually think though that long term, I don't know if he's an ace. I don't think he's an ace, frankly, let's be honest. I don't think he's like a top of the rotation guy, but I think he's the kind of guy that can be a, solid low end 2, high end number 3 starter on a really good team. And that's with the caveat, obviously, that they're not 30 aces in baseball. So Does that make him one of the top 25, 30 pitchers in baseball? Probably. So yeah, he's a really good pitcher. Um, I don't know, like I more trend on the side of this might be the career year, but long term, I still think that he's firmly established himself as a really legitimate rotation piece worth, who's, as you said, I think the highest pitcher war in baseball this year. And he's going to be someone who the Red Sox, as long as he stays healthy, obviously can count on to be a rotation anchor for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think it's sustainable. Obviously, not to this level because no one is going to consistently pitch to a 2.18 ERA across
Exactly.
innings. What point does he get an innings cap this year, though? Are they going to start kind of pulling the reins in on him a bit just to make sure that he's healthy all year or he's available all year?
It's an interesting one because I feel like he's working so deep into games. Like he's gone 6 or 7 innings in pretty much every outing. But I don't think the pitch count has been that bad. Like,
Yeah.
and I do wonder if I don't know if they're more like are they basing things off decisions off pitch counts or innings. But it is a good question because like his career high in innings in the majors is 106. So he's not exactly, he's going to surpass that in his next outing. So maybe they start try to skip him around, do some shenanigans around the All-Star break where he gets like 2 weeks off. I could see that. But that's a very good question. Something definitely to monitor going forward. The next player I want to talk about, someone just came off the injured list, and that's Wilyer Abreu. And I think he's always been a StatCast darling. This season, he's 260, 328, 464 with 6 home runs, 7 steals in 201 plate appearances. So, on pace for a 15-15 season, probably closer to 2020 if he played a full season. With him, where are you at long term? Do you buy him as, someone who could be an everyday right field option, or are you more still he might be more of a platoon bat going forward?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I think that he's performed extremely well to this point and has slowed down a bit from a kind of, torrid start that he had to the year, but obviously much better against righties than lefties. And it's been a small sample. So I'm not going to say
he's 29 plate appearances versus lefties, just for context this year.
Right. So I'm not going to sit here and say like this is what it's going to be. I do want to pull up his minor league splits from last year just to kind of confirm and see like was it an issue in the minors last year, because some guys it's just a small sample thing. And he hit lefties all right last year. I mean, it's 250, 318, 421. So a 739 OPS. And again, 85 plate appearances. So we don't want to put a huge stamp on that. But a guy that can hit the same-handed pitch, a lefty that hits a left-handed pitcher with a 740 OPS, like if he does that in the majors, he can be an everyday player. Does he fit best as a platoon? The stats may kind of support that, and he may put up really good-looking numbers if he was strictly playing against right-handed arms, which we know he can mash. Hits the ball hard, good barrel rates. He moves pretty well for the build, shorter, stockier build, but he does move pretty well too and provides a little bit on the base paths. He's decent in the field. I think I think it's sustainable what he's doing. Like if you go into it expecting him to be a 15 to maybe 20 home run bat over a full season that hits somewhere around 260, puts up okay OBP. It's like, yeah, I think that's a fair expectation for Abreu. And I think he can be a really solid player for the Red Sox long term. And I think he's been a pleasant surprise and one that can stick around for a while. He's just 25 years old and doing this, which I'd say is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think that and speaking of the defense, I mean he's got an elite arm. He's like 98th percentile in arm strength, 94.8 from the outfield. So that also is a nice benefit for right field at Fenway, given how big it is. But I think that I lean more towards him being platoonish. I think that he's someone that a team that is not necessarily competing for the World Series or, just an average team can throw him out as an everyday guy and kind of take the lumps of him facing lefties. But I think if you're a team that has World Series aspirations or is looking, trying to be one of the, top 5, 10 teams in baseball in contention every year, he's someone to me more that you would like to have as kind of like in that third outfield spot where he's probably not playing every day. You sit him against tough lefties. Kind of try to maximize his potential where almost less is more, get him in there against every righty, pinch hit him against righties when they get to the bullpen late, if a lefty's starting, things like that. I think that's the way I would look to maximize his value because I have concerns about him against lefties, against good lefties, especially too. He strikes out at a high rate already, and that's while facing minimal lefties. So I think that's something that I think I like the way the Red Sox have used him this year, kind of minimizing his exposure to lefties. And I think he can still be an extremely valuable player, but I buy him more as kind of a platoon bat than I do as a everyday mainstay in the lineup. Kind of which is how I view someone like Jaron Duran or now Tanner Houck in the rotation.
Yeah.
The final player I want to talk about is someone who we spent a lot of time talking about early in the season, then we didn't really talk about for a stretch. And now they're back, and David Hamilton is raking. For the season, he's hitting 282, 333, 449. He's got 5 home runs, 21 steals. Another guy who kind of falls into that camp, like Jaron Duran, where his speed and athleticism is just making a difference on the offensive side. And I think I have a feeling we're probably going to be on the same side of the fence with this long term. But so I guess we'll let you go first though. So where are you at on is David Hamilton a potential everyday player long term, or do you think of him more as probably a really good utility or a good utility type?
Yeah, I think he fits the utility mold a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, he's surface numbers looked extremely good. I just don't see it sticking. Good legs. I think he can be very useful in a utility role, off the bench type. You could pinch run in a spot. You could pinch hit if you need. I just don't see the sustainability in what he's doing as an everyday guy. And I know right now, like he's got to be an everyday guy to fit in the lineup with the injuries and such. But I do think it probably comes down to earth a bit. I don't expect, he's shown some decent home run numbers, and I don't expect that to stick. Not a power hitter. Exit velocities are well below average there. He just hits the ball at ideal launch angles. Like you look at the sweet spot rate, and it's one of the best in baseball. He also whiffs a lot. He's striking out, at a worse than average rate. So I don't see this as sustainable right now, but you ride the hot streak as long as it goes, and he's providing. So you have to ride this out if you're the Red Sox. And then hopefully by the time, if he does cool off, at the end of the day, hopefully you have somebody else in place that's ready to go in that spot that he's playing right now, and you bumped Hamilton to the utility, off the bench type role.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that I still think the defense at shortstop is questionable. I know it's gotten a little better as the season goes on, but I still think I just don't trust him as an everyday option there. And at the plate, as you said, he does a good job of maximizing what he can do. A lot of that is, the launch angle aspect of it. He doesn't chase, which I really like. And he's found a way to use his legs, even though he hits a few too many fly balls for my liking. But he's stealing at a really efficient clip, and he's one of the fastest guys in baseball. But I think that when you look at kind of his season long stats, the outlier is the June month with the home runs and the kind of the run production. And I think if going in that he's long term probably more of like a singles gap hitter. You don't count on the over the fence power, but if he can play, if he can get in at shortstop on occasion, play mostly second base, and I still think I'd like to see him play the outfield a little bit, kind of see what he can do out there. Obviously, with this Red Sox team, they don't really need that when they have too many left-handed hitting outfielders already. But going forward, I'd love to see him kind of add that to his repertoire, give him multiple position flexibility, because I do think that the bat and the legs will provide enough that he could be a really good, like, kind of utility type. Moving on to your neck of the woods, kind of jumping around from the major league team. Let's wanted to check in, kind of see what you've been seeing in Greenville this week. Obviously, or not this week, I guess in the last few weeks. You've obviously gotten some new players there. I think since we last talked, Josh Nixon Garcia, Blake Wehunt, and Miguel Bleis have been added to the roster or promoted. And I think Mikey Romero, Yoroni Monegro, like they've had a lot of guys debut too. So what a kind of anyone really standing out from that group, or what are your first impressions of kind of the guys that have matriculated up to Greenville over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I mean, Stinson Garcia's been the most impressive. He's been a ton of fun to watch. And, it's interesting because you look at him and I don't see the kind of ball player and athlete that he is in the body, but he makes things work. The field of hits really strong. He's posted some really good contact rates since moving to Greenville, and he's put up power too. Like he's got all fields power. He shows the ability to turn on inside pitches. He can go the other way, and he has 7 home runs already in 86 plate appearances in Greenville, which is quite impressive what he's done so far. And he obviously hit home runs in Salem too, which is a kind of hard place to hit. But I don't know. I see the body of work from Garcia, and it's just a very solid profile. And the gloves, I wonder, where does he fit long term? Probably going to have to play a corner outfield spot. It's been interesting since Miguel Bleis came up. He's played some more DH. Bleis has manned center. Garcia's played some right field as well. So you're kind of seeing him. He had played center when he first came up, and Bleis kind of bumped him out of that spot. So, it'll be interesting. I think the body progression will be a big telling point here because he's already quite filled out. And I think that'll be the telling point of where does he play and where does he fit. But with the bat, it's good. I thoroughly like the feel to hit, and the power's been very solid too. So, Stinson Garcia, aka known as the password, has been.
It's a great nickname. Yeah, I think that the thing that really stands out is how hard he hits the ball. His max EV is in his 90th percentile exit velocity is near the top of the system, and he's really strong. Like as you said, the body, I think it's pretty maxed out. I kind of think he is what he is physically. But I think for me, it's just going to come down to approach, and I think this is something that we're not really going to know until he gets to Double-A because of the state of minor league pitching. There's just not a lot of good pitchers in A-ball these days. That once he gets up to Double-A is where things like he's got an above average, or he's got a high chase rate, he's got a high end zone miss rate. He's pretty aggressive at the plate. Things like that aren't really exposed until you get to Double-A these days. So he's someone that I like, and I think is definitely put them on themselves in like the top 30 picture, but I'm going to need to see it in Double-A before I buy into him fully, just because of those concerns about the approach long term.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's a fun story right now, shooting up rankings, but I want to see the body of work over a larger sample. Again, we're still talking even in Greenville. Larger sample, and then even to Double-A. I think it'll be pretty telling.
Yeah, and I think too, and I think you'll know this well. Greenville in the summer is a nice place to hit. So there's going to be some if you've got power and you can elevate the ball, you can put up some really big numbers there. And I think he's going to have a very fun summer hitting in that ballpark. Speaking of hitting, what have you thought about Miguel Bleis so far? Because if you look at his numbers, he hasn't really hit at all since he's been promoted. But obviously, you've been on boots on the ground, kind of seeing him. What are you seeing from him at the plate? What are your initial impressions?
I think when he first got the call, it was a little bit of pressing. Mm-hmm. Those first couple games, just trying to do too much because everybody knows that he has the talent.
Yeah.
Frankly, he stepped into the lineup and is the most talented hitter from a pure talent standpoint. And I think that he was just trying to just prove that. And the first weren't ideal. He was swinging a lot, chasing a lot, and pressing. But we've kind of seen him settle in. He missed a little bit of time, after that first week. I think it was a sprained finger, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it was wasn't it a tooth infection or something?
Weird. I
thought it was something weird. I don't remember. You could be right. I don't remember.
There was something weird that happened that kept him out for half the series in Rome last week. And so that obviously was, some time off. I think he had 7 total days off, and he's only had 4 games back since then. Hitless last night, but he's had the moments where he's looked good and he's hit the ball quite hard. Earlier, I think it was in the Asheville series a couple weeks ago, in that Saturday game when Cutter Coffee broke the record from Greenville for amount of straight home runs in games we'll talk about. Bleis had 3 batted balls over 104, which was pretty impressive in the game. A lot of line drive. I think he's topped out at 112.5 this year as a max, which is pretty good. I mean,
so it's an increase from last year too. Obviously last year he had a rough year, but
I mean, he's a young 20. Like he turned 20 in March.
Yeah.
IA, 20 years old. Like I think you'll see him kind of continue to progress. I will say, I think he has really good reads in the outfield. And that's what kind of stood out to me the most out of the gate is that he's quick first step. He has good reads and he's pretty good glove in center field. I mean, whether he sticks there long term is kind of still to be determined. Could depend on the body a little bit, but right now he's shown good athleticism. He's shown decent speed. And I thought the glove has honestly stood out to me as much as the bat right now, which is a pretty good thing, I'd say.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, as we talk about over and over again, you can't underrate defense. Defense is what gives you that floor where there's just so much less pressure on the bat if you project as someone who can add value, especially at a premium position. Whereas if he can stick at center field, that's a huge boost to his value. I think that the thing I've liked the most since his promotion is that even though the numbers aren't great, and I do wonder if a lot of it is batted ball luck because he's putting the ball in play. Like he has 5 strikeouts in um almost 40 plate appearances since his promotion. Yeah, 39 plate appearances. And that was something that I was a little concerned about was what is he going to look like when he gets against better secondary offerings? Because he hit fastballs really well in Salem this year, but he had his troubles with off speed. And he's gone up there and he's cut his strikeout rate. It's a small sample, but cutting it from it was 19.5 in Salem this year to 12.8 with Greenville. That's pretty encouraging, and he's maintaining a similar walk rate. So that's something I like, and I find it hard to believe someone with his athleticism is going to continue to run a 172 BABIP. So I'm going to guess those numbers will equal out. It seems like a lot of it is just the infield fly ball rate's really high right now. So I do wonder if he's just kind of getting under the ball too much, kind of swing, maybe trying a little too hard to impress. But yeah, I think that it sounds about right that you see the flashes right now, but it's just about for him. It's just about getting consistent with it and putting it together over longer periods of time. The new pitcher that you got, kind of your first impression, is someone that I think were you there in spring training when we saw him? You think you were, right? The chicken farmer himself, Blake Wehunt. I think he's gotten off. If you look at his starts, he's up to 3 starts right now with Greenville. I think one of them was rough, and then he's had 2, solid ones. So what have you seen from him so far, and kind of your initial impressions?
Yeah, the only one I've seen is the rough one because he was on the road the other 2. So
Okay,
I'm
that's
not
tough.
tonight as we're recording this on Wednesday, and I'll be there again tonight to see that. So hopefully get a better look at him. But he showed flashes, I will say, in the
Yeah,
start.
I'm looking at it. His line from that start compared to the others, it's night and day. Yeah, that was a rough start.
But the stuff was there. Like when he had the splitter working, it was things were, really there. And it was Asheville. They have 2 really good hitters at the top of the lineup in Bryce Matthews and Luis Baez. And he actually made both of them look silly twice in that start with those splitters. I mean, he struck out 6 in 3 innings, and 4 of those were Matthews and Wehunt both times he saw him, or Matthews and Baez, excuse me, which I would say is pretty good. The home runs, it was fastball left over the middle both times, and they got all of them. Like it was not cheap shots on either of those home runs that he did allow. And so it was a short leash, and he got yanked pretty quick in just 3 innings of work. I think he came back out for the 4th, if I'm not mistaken. And that was when he gave up the second home run and they pulled him. And so it was an interesting bag. I did like the fastball at times, but he just wasn't commanding it consistently, which I think is going to be kind of the big sticking point. Like, can he make the fastball work? And I think that right now that's the question. It's set 93 to 94 in the start. He showed the slider. He showed the splitter really good. I thought that was the best pitch for him in my. And I was trying to decipher, and I'm hoping to see it again. Like I almost think he was throwing a cutter, and it was like 88. And so I hope I'll get some more looks at that tonight or whenever he pitches again, because I was really interested to kind of see he didn't throw it a lot. It was a couple times, but again, he wasn't in long enough where it was like, okay, like I'm confident that this is what he was throwing, kind of thing. So, I'm looking forward to seeing him again because, like you mentioned, the other 2 starts have been much better on the road than it was in Greenville. So, yeah, I will hopefully have a better look at him this time around.
Yeah, I think that what you said sounds about right. It's tough to read too much into it from 3 starts. But I mean, it seems like he's missing bats, which I think is encouraging. Like the start you saw, he got 11 swinging strikes. He's had 7 in another one, and he's not going that deep. He's going like 4 or 5 innings, only about 75 pitches at most. So I think that's encouraging that he's showing that bat missing ability already. With what you said about the cutter, I'm actually curious now. So let's look. No, they don't have a cutter. They have him throwing the slider. So I wonder maybe he's adding and subtracting from the slider. Be the only thing I can think of.
What is the
Um,
sitting at? 'Cause I've got breaking balls as low as 81 and then up to 88.
it could be it could be reading it coming like going they're putting it in as a slider. So that would make sense. Maybe he is throwing both now. I'll have to investigate on that. But that would be interesting because he was mostly a three pitch guy before that. He's fastball, slider, and as you said, the changeup splitter. So yeah, that's I mean interested to hear what you think of him going forward because I still think he's been a really good story this year. His breakout. That's still the long term. It's TBD is probably more like a bullpen type, but if he can develop, like a plus secondary offering, that gives you really high floor as a bullpen arm. Let's talk about Cutter Coffee. Um, he I think he's cooled down finally. It took, long enough, but he was, he hit what home runs in 6 straight games. He raised his season line from he was hitting under 200 to now he's hitting 250, 328, 515. He has 12 home runs this year, which is double his career high, or well, I guess it's double his career total is a better way of putting it. And since I would guess since this kind of streak started, he had his first home run against Hickory, the last game of the Hickory series on the 9th. Um, he has gone in 12 games, 52 plate appearances. He's hitting 422, 500, 1,000. Most interesting thing to me, 7 walks, 7 strikeouts. What's going on with Cutter Coffee?
Yeah, it's so interesting. As you mentioned, the start of it, the streak was that last game in Hickory. I was there that Tuesday against Asheville, and that was when we Hunt pitched. It's kind of funny because during that game, he dropped below 200. Like the first couple of bats, I think, were outs. He didn't strike out that game, but he did get out. I think a couple choppers. He had made 2 errors at third base. Literally, that third time he came up to bat, there were people sitting behind the plate with me that were just like, we're literally like yelling to get him out off the field.
Oh dear.
It was bad because he had, after the 2 errors at third, and I don't even think they charged him with one of them, but it was 2 ground balls that should have been like easily fielded. He just whiffed on them. And then he gets up, he mashes the home run, and everybody was like, oh, I guess we should talk crap about him more, kind of thing, which was interesting. It was weird because there was like a group of like 10 people in front of me that were just all just nipping at him. And then I guess maybe he heard it as he decided to get hot because he did that all right. And the streak continued. And then that Saturday game, he hit 2. And that, I think, broke the record on Saturday. He had another one on Sunday against Asheville. So it was 7 home runs in a 6-game stretch where he was just on fire. And he had 7 RBI in that Saturday game as well. I was at that one. It was wild to watch the streak. And really, even since then, he hasn't cooled down. Like, yeah, there's not been the home runs. He did hit one last week, but he still had plenty of hits. Like, as you mentioned, he's not striking out as much. He's still having plenty of hits because last week in the series at Rome, he had 2 multi-hit games and then 2 other games where he had a hit. So only 2 games without. And then Sunday's game, it looks like that, he only had 2 plate appearances. And he didn't play yesterday, which is interesting. Now I'm kind of curious. I need to investigate that a little bit. I will check in on that tonight because now I'm curious. But aside the point, I think that, you had texted me and you're like, you have the video from April to, June. And so we kind of and looked at it, and it's subtle. Like, it's not like an overhaul and a swing change, but there are some subtle things that, I did notice. I think the leg kick is more prominent. He'd been kind of toe tapping on 2 strikes, but leg kicking in other counts. And now there's a bigger leg hike and there's less bat wrap at the top with his hands. You kind of mentioned that. I'm kind of curious if this sticks, and I'm going to look at some more video of it and I'm curious kind of how it progresses throughout the year. Like, is this a legitimate change that's actually helping him get to more bat to ball? Because honestly, the strikeouts have been pretty bad like before. And since this kind of change per se, it's been really noticeably different. As you mentioned, he's not striking out nearly as much. And if we look since kind of that streak started, you go back to June the 9th when he hit that first home run in Hickory. As you mentioned, 7 strikeouts. That's only a 13% clip. So that's a huge, huge boost. And it's a small sample we're talking. So I am curious to see it more over than just 12 games, but hard to argue the results right now with what he's doing. I think that it's been fun to watch. I have questions if it's sustainable because even some of the home runs were like 95 EV, 98.
Yeah.
It's like okay, like just pop flies that were going over the green monster out there, which is easy to do. As you mentioned, the ball travels in the heat of the Greenville summer. But yeah, I mean, it's been absolutely fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, and like his batted ball data is better than last year. He is hitting the ball harder. It's not on the level of a lot of the top guys we talk about. But yeah, I think that the strikeout rate change is what's interesting because in the 29 games, because he obviously missed some time with injury before that streak or before the homer streak started, he had a 27% strikeout rate. He had 35 strikeouts and 131 plate appearances. So that's a pretty drastic shift in season to go from 27% for 30 games to what did you say, 13%, 12% for what now it's about 14, 15, 13, 14 games. So it's definitely going to be interesting to follow him to see how sustainable this is. But it's a good reminder that something I was talking to a scout about it a couple weeks ago about him, and they saw him during the cold streak. And even with that, they were like, yeah, I kept him alive because I still think there is some untapped potential here. Um, there are certain guys, especially when you're a pedigree guy, I think you get more of a benefit of the doubt. But, you know, if you can do something like Coffey's got power, like if you can still show that skill set, you can't bail on a guy after a season and a half, or I guess he's 2 seasons now. Like sometimes it's just development. We say this over and over again. Development's not linear. And some guys are just, you don't know what is going to unlock their potential. And it's good to see that, he's finally taken that step and kind of tapping into the areas that the Red Sox saw when they drafted him and gave him, almost a mid-second round bonus, so close to $1.7 million or something. Just kind of rapid fire on the last couple of guys. Mikey Romero's back healthy. I don't think he's still playing like every day consistently or playing the field consistently, but at least it's good to see him back on the field. Kind of what are your just quick thoughts, initial impressions of him?
Yeah, he's shown his ups and downs, and I kind of think that's to be expected, just given.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have a spring training either. He's another one like that. So
he didn't have a spring training. He had 3 games at the complex before they brought him up, and he's played inconsistently, as you mentioned. He's finally back to the point, like over the last 2 weeks, where he's playing most every day, which I'd say is pretty substantial. And he's hitting now. Like you see, since he started playing pretty regularly, he has gotten on base in every game but one over that span, and that's started on June the 7th. So that's pretty solid. I look at Romero, and I still think there's some, untapped potential, as you mentioned with Coffey. I see it here too, where, he's still 20 years old. Like I feel like there's some room to kind of add to this frame. And I do think there's a little more juice to be added. The contact has been interesting. It's been kind of inconsistent at times, but he has shown the flashes where it's like, okay, like you can see it, but it's just getting the timing mechanism back. I'd say, like, I think right now his contact rates are kind of around average for the league. And last night, he had 3 hits. He had 2 triples, which was notable. He does have speed when he wants to turn it on. And I still say that probably if he fills out, it's probably an average runner long term. But right now, like he's showing some decent legs when he's putting the ball in the gaps. So right now, it's just been the inconsistencies, which I think it's okay. Like I'm not, going to write anything off at this point. I just think at the moment it's about seeing steady improvement, and I think we've seen signs of that over the last few weeks of him just playing more regularly, getting his timing mechanism back. He's going to start getting on base more. He's going to start hitting for a little more power, I suspect. And, you're going to start seeing the results, and the box score is going to look better. Because right now, the box score, if you look at it, it's like, like not great stuff. But I do think that, watching him I've seen enough to say, all right, I do think that, you know, the bat can be there. The glove's still interesting to me. Like I'm not really confident in the glove. And again, it's a thing where he hasn't played a ton. So I want to give him the benefit of the doubt here. He's played some short, he's played some second as well in Greenville. I think he's probably a second baseman long term. I don't see him as a shortstop, but I am kind of curious to see, like, as he gets his feel back for the speed of the game, like, where does the glove land? Because there's been some moments too, like I mentioned with Coffee, where it's just like, okay, like that play should have been made in the field and he didn't.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the key is like it's not what he's doing right now. It's more what I'm interested to see what he's doing, in August. I'm kind of right now he's still ramping back up, as you said. So let's kind of see how it looks in a couple months before we kind of read too much into him, because he's just obviously he's at between injuries. He's just had a lot going on that has made it tough to kind of get consistent playing time and get out there and just focus on baseball. The final two guys are pitchers, and they're both one of them is coming back from an injury and one of them was via promotion. But you've added your Donnie Monegro and Jetixon Paez to the rotation, and I think both are kind of been up and down. Paez, it seems like now, is kind of pitching more in a piggyback bullpen role. Monegro starting, but not going very deep into games. What are your initial thoughts on those two with what you've seen so far?
Yeah, Monegro has been really good when I've seen him. And that's kind of been the case even last year. Like, I've only seen all of his great starts. Every time I'm there, he seems he pitches pretty well. And, against Asheville last week, he struck out, or 2 weeks ago, I guess at this point, he struck out 8 over 4 innings. He allowed 2 earned. It was just via a home run. But otherwise, I thought the start was really, really good. He flashed some good stuff. It's interesting because he's kind of changed the pitch mix from last year. He's got last year, I'll say he didn't really have anything that was east-west. It was everything north-south. And so the curveball was great. Like, the curveball was a lot of fun last year, and it's still there. Like, he'll drop in the curveball at the top of the zone for a called strike. He'll dump it out of the bottom of the zone. But this year he's throwing a splitter more, which actually does have some drop and then late dive to it, which I think is notable, but he's also throwing the slider more. And I think that's really the biggest factor, is he just needs that consistent feel for the slider. Fastball is good. It was sitting 94 to 96. I think that's obviously pretty notable for Monegro. He's had the fastball. I think that it's, and we talked a little about it before, it's now kind of a sinker variation, which I think was best for the Arsenal here. And I think that, he's going to be fine. The last 2 starts have been much better. He pitched pretty good over in Rome last week with 4 scoreless, just 2 walks, but 4 strikeouts as well, 2 hits allowed. So I'm curious what he looks like this week against Hickory again. So he'll faced Hickory twice now, and Hickory was one of his rough starts when he went there last time. So what does he look like this time out this week? To be determined, but I do really like what he brings to the table, and I really like the changes he made this offseason. I think that's pretty notable that he did the things that he needed to do to really kind of take the next step forward as a pitcher.
Yeah, playing off what you said, like last year he used his changeup splitter less than 1% of the time, and this year it's like, I think it's like 8. I haven't looked recently, but it was like 7-8% last time I looked, and I think it was pushing closer to double digits. So that's a really encouraging change, because that was definitely something I noticed. Is it's hard to be a breaking ball variation pitcher when you have a below average fastball, and that's the other thing, is you said like throwing the sinker is good. Have you seen him throwing any cutters, or is that because I wasn't sure that if he's throwing either the harder slider or if he's actually throwing a true cutter.
Well, I've got the slider ranging from 84 to 89. So probably I would say the higher end's probably
Yeah,
cutter.
the data has a cutter. That's what I was wondering. But I wasn't sure if it's, as you said, it could just be a harder slider. But
Yeah, and the movement profile wasn't all that dissimilar. I mean, probably a little bit more sweep on the slider, the 85, 86, but I did have some 88s, 89s in there as well that I kind of grouped together. And
yeah,
other variations. I'm gonna watch a little more closely next start out to kind of see, I'll try to get the TrackMan data on that, just to kind of back and support. Like, is he actually getting more sweep on the slider versus the cutter being a little shorter? At times the slider did have the shorter horizontal, so they kind of blended together. But yeah,
Yeah.
certain difference is notable.
Well, it's just good to see him making some changes because as good a year as he did have last year, I do think these were necessary for him to reach his potential because it wasn't going to work just being a breaking ball pitcher basically. And then who's the other? Oh, Jetix Paez. Any thoughts on him?
He's shown flashes. I'll say that. He's had his moments where he's looked really good. And I've only seen one star. He piggybacked Monegro, and he was really good in 5 1/3 against Asheville. He had 10 strikeouts that game, 2 earned. The others he's had some shorter outing. Last week was a shorter outing, just 3 innings, 3 earned. So there's been some inconsistencies with Paez. The fastball, I think, it's kind of ticked up from last year a bit. He's shown some flashes of being able to miss bats, which I think is pretty notable. Where I look at it and say, okay, like I think that there is the potential here for Paez to take that step forward, but it's just the inconsistencies right now. There's moments where he's missing with that fastball and is getting hit. Curveball's been decent pitch. He's on the changeup some, but I just want to see the consistency with the command because when he's missing, and while he's throwing strikes, I'll note that like he's throwing a lot of strikes. He actually didn't walk a batter in his first 3 starts in Greenville until last week. He walked 2 in 3 innings, but it's more the location, I guess, of the pitches where when he's missing, he's getting hit, and so you'd like to see that kind of cleaned up a little bit. But I mean, it's a young kid that's taking a step forward to high A. The bats are a little better. So I think that, he's going to be okay long term. I'm curious what kind of role they want him in. He's obviously pitched in mostly 4 to 5 inning stints this year, which tells me they at least are going to give him run as a starter right now. But it's more been in a piggyback role, which is interesting.
Yeah, and with him, it's for me the tough part, and I still think the limiting factor is he's like 91, 92. That's even with, and that is an increase, but it's so marginal that it's still, the velo is just not there. So the margin for error is just really low compared to someone like Monegro who's in the mid 90s. Even like some of the other members of the staff, like Connolly earlier, still throwing, 93, 94. So I think that's always kind of the thing I've had the most trouble with Paez is if your fastball's fringy, you have to have really good secondaries. And I'm just not sure his secondaries are as advanced as someone like Monegro to be able to overcome that. That's going to wrap it up for the Greenville chatter. And so, Chris, do you want to jump into emails to take us home for the episode? So the first email is from Jacob, and his question is, "Hello, Chris and Ian." I'm just going to assume he knew you were going to be on, and he was talking to you, and certainly not the other Chris, who will not be named this episode. Do you believe it is possible for Luis Perales, Christian Campbell, Yohan Cespedes, and Miguel Blaze to join Marcelo Meyer, Roman Anthony, and Kyle Teal on the majority of prospect ranking lists by the end of the season? What do they need to do this season to make it on these lists? Or what are some of the reasons why they may be excluded? Big fan of the website and podcast. Thank you for making the season more enjoyable, from Jacob. Thank you, Jacob, for the kind words. Chris, I'll let you answer that first. If I set an over-under at 4.5 Red Sox on end of season top 100 list, are you taking the over or the under?
Take the over. I think it would be an easy over if Perales was healthy.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Perales is easily on top one. And he jumped way up on Baseball America's last update.
He's probably a top 50 guy if he stayed healthy this year by the end of the year.
It was very legit. So I think that the answers to me is yes. I think you probably see 5. I think Campbell is going to be there by midseason for most. And so then you just have to put one of Blyce or Cespedes on the list. And I think if Cespedes performs in Salem, then he's probably there. Like if he performs anywhere near the level he has in the DSL and complex, yeah, I think you're looking at a back end top 100. And I certainly think Miguel Blyce can get there as well. Like I think that, as you mentioned, as we talked about, the numbers don't look great in Greenville. I do think he gets there. I'm almost certain that he was on Fangraphs top 100 preseason.
He was, yeah. I think Keith Law might have had him ranked also preseason.
So he gets hot in the summer. Yeah, I think that that's your path. So you get Campbell, and then you just need one of the two of Blyce and Cespedes, which I think is realistic, and I think it could happen. If Perales is not down, easy answer, over.
Yeah, I mean, if Perales was not there, though, the number would have been 5.5, not 4.5, because I would have said there's 4 locks there. I think I might lean under. And here's why is I think that Campbell is just such a interesting prospect. And we've talked about it, but I mean, there's been a lot of discourse. I think Baseball America had it in their hot sheet chat. They had a discussion about Campbell and why he's not getting a ton of love from the scouting community as good as his numbers are. And that's something I've been saying too, and hearing, talking to scouts is it's just a lot of, it's just people are still questioning it, even as good as he's performing. And the batted ball data is crazy, and the things, the issues, one of them being his in zone contact rate or in zone whiff rate is actually trending in the right direction since his promotion, which is pretty interesting. But I mean, even when I say all that, I talked to someone yesterday who was like, I don't buy it until he gets to the majors. I need to see it. And I think he's going to end up being one of those guys who's just going to have to prove it at every level. And I think the wild card and what actually might keep him off the list more, though, is I'm not sure where he plays defensively. He's kind of learning the outfield. It's new. And I got some decent feedback on him in the outfield. I think he's taken to it pretty well, but he's still pretty raw out there. And second base, it's fine. So if the defense is only going to be like fringy average type, a lot of pressure on the bat again. And if they're, if scouts have questions about the bat, I could see that keeping them off the top 100 lists when they get the feedback from there. But I could see also the flip side is if you're, something that is more model driven, I'm sure he pops on those models because his batted ball, like EV data and stuff, especially if he's doing that as a 21-year-old double A, is going to really stand out. Then with the other two, with Blaze, I think the thing that would keep him off is just inability to hit secondary pitches / approach. He's crushed fastballs this year. He's had a lot of trouble with breaking balls, and especially with changeups. He's got one of the lowest OPSs against changeups in the entire system. So if he can't figure that out, I could see that keeping him off. And then Cespedes is kind of what we talked about earlier. I think it's the defense is going to be the question with him. I'll probably go under. I think one of those guys gets on, but I don't think two do. And this is assuming I could see some people just leaving Paralis on too because of how good his stuff was. That's kind of the wild card here is maybe Paralis sneaks in at like 100 for a couple people because his stuff, as we said, is like top 50 in all of baseball was what he was showing before the injury. So really good question though, Jacob. That was a fun discussion. The next email is from a good friend of the show and Patreon supporter, Forrest Perkins. And his question, again, to Chris and Ian, it's almost like they all knew that you were going to be on here. Regardless of how the season ends, there's a strong core of talented players that we all want to see get a little more investment and become a legit competitor. So I spent some time scouring other teams that might be sellers to see if there are any interesting fits that landed on this proposal. Assuming Garrett Crochet is untouchable or too costly, I would like to see the Red Sox take a shot on trading for Patrick Sandoval. Unfortunately, Forrest, and he just had Tommy John surgery. So this email was sent last week. So at the time he was healthy. But I think the construct, let's replace Patrick Sandoval with let's just say Reed Detmers. Gets us a lefty in our righty heavy staff who has had a bad year, but his baseball reference numbers show some signs of bad luck. I say let Andrew Bailey cook. We have way too many prospects who will be Rule 5 eligible, so I look mainly for a group that we could trade from, to be clear. I don't think the Red Sox have to trade all these guys, but something involving someone like Fitz, York, Jordan, Lugo, Dobbins, Chase Mydroth. I'd even think about adding Christian Campbell to sweeten deal. What do you think? So I think there's two separate talking points there, and I think the first one is, do you think going out and getting a cost-controlled starter is a good idea? And I think we both agree on that. I think we talked about that earlier, that's something we definitely both like to see. I think the second part, I think those names are down the right path and it's something we're going to talk a lot more about when we get closer to the deadline and in the offseason is they have a lot of interesting guys they need to add to Rule 5. And I think if you're going to be go out and buying at the deadline, that's the prospect pool you deal with. You try to avoid dealing from guys that you don't have to worry about that for a few years. If you find a team that really likes Blaze Jordan, really likes Nick York, that's might be a time to capitalize on their prospect value, especially with both of them performing lately, and go out there and get something to help the MLB team because I don't think they have enough spots to add guys, as many guys as they're going to need to the 40 man in the offseason. And it's further kind of the situation like Morales going down kind of hurts you there because that's a spot just taken up by someone who is not going to be playing at all. So you're basically operating with a 39 man, 40 man roster already. And like Liam Hendricks isn't going to be pitching either. Maybe he'll be back to start next year, but like you're going into the offseason with some question marks already on the back end of the 40. Guys like Whitlock's not going to be ready. Chris Murphy, TBD, if he's ready. Like in the offseason, you have to add all those guys back. So there's going to be there has the potential to be a real crunch. So I think that what he was talking about kind of dealing from that 40-man depth group is a area the Red Sox might look to exploit at the deadline. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that you're spot on. I don't think they're going to go make a big splash, but I think, mid-tier starting pitcher on the trade market certainly could be a realistic opportunity there.
Oh, this is actually the next question is from Christopher, a different Christopher again. There's way too many Chris's on this episode. But anyway, hi guys. What does Alan Castro need to do to get some mention on the podcast? From last July until now, he's moved from 24 to 12, but he wasn't discussed in the latest ranking podcast or the podcast with Chris Clegg about Greenville. Oops. I guess we brought him again. What are his strengths and weaknesses? What does he need to do to improve to eventually contribute at the major league level? And what chance do you give him of reaching that level? Thank you as always, Chris. Alan Castro, since this is this perfectly timed email. What do you think? Where are you at with him right now? And what have you seen from him lately?
He's not been the same guy that I saw last year. Honestly, like I liked what I saw last year out of Alan Castro upon the promotion. I thought he did some really good things. He had showed some decent pop and, gap power, and he had a good feel to hit. And this year, it's a ton of strikeouts. Like we've seen the contact rate go the wrong direction, which is a little bit concerning. I think that he's whiffed a lot when I've seen him. And so I look at the profile, I'm like, all right, who is Alan Castro at this point? And right now, I just can't confidently say that he's someone that I really love. And I thought I liked him a little more when I first saw him. Saw him this spring. I thought the body had changed a little bit, and I thought it'd be for the better. I thought he'd add a little bit of strength, but so far we have not seen that at all. He has really been awful as a right-handed batter, switch hitter. He's been terrible with the right-handed stick against lefties. 177, 255, so like a 531 OPS. Not hitting much better for contact as a left-handed batter either. I mean, he's got a 380 OBP. He's a little more passive from the left side. It seems like he has better pitch recognition, at least, but I haven't seen a lot to warrant a ton of discussion. I will say he's picked it up as of late. Like Cutter Coffee gets hot. Castro's been hitting a little better as of late too. He has 2 home runs in the last 4 games. Last night he had another home run. I think that was a good, continuing stretch. And he's had a couple multi-hit games in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, I want to monitor that at least and see. But right now, like he hasn't showed me a ton with the bat. It's like a lot of regression from what I saw last year. In all honesty, more hitting the ball on the ground. It's a major drop in home run to fly ball. Like, don't like to see that. Less line drives to all fields too, which is something that was a strength last year, I'd say. And he really hasn't flashed a ton with a glove. So yeah, I don't want to sit here and dump on the guy, but he has not been the same player that I saw last year.
It's interesting though, because like his underlying data and just in terms of exit velocities and batted ball, hard hit rate and stuff is actually way up from last year. But as you said, like the strikeout rate is up almost 5% or 4%, almost 5%. His OBP is the same, but his average has dropped like 70 points. He's just not making as much consistent contact as you said. The walk rate is also way up though from when he was in Greenville last year. I was at 9% last year. It's at 17%. And I do think Castro is one of those guys who borders on being too passive at the plate. He sees a lot of pitches and he does a good job working counts, but you gotta get aggressive. And if you see a pitch you can hit early in the bat, I'd like to see him be a little bit more aggressive going after that. And I also think the left-right thing is a concern. I've had some scouts suggest to me that he should abandon switch hitting and just hit left-handed because the righty swing is just not there. And I'm curious if that's something the Red Sox kind of explore this offseason with him, because he's had major platoon splits his entire career. And it's generally, if you have, people who go in there and are writing him up and saying he can't hit lefties at all, like to the point where he should abandon it, then that's something to watch. But even with all that said, I still think there's some upside there just because of the batted ball profile, and he does know what he's doing at the plate. So I think that he's moved up, more because, as we said, there's not that much of a difference between like 10 and 30 in the system. They're all kind of the same future value. But he's definitely someone who I think needs to kind of turn it on a little bit, or he might, fall behind some other guys, especially with the draft coming up soon and an influx of talent coming to the system. The next email is from Andrew, and Andrew asks, hey guys, with Grissom still on the IL and Valdez, Hamilton, Romy too doing well at the plate, would you expect the Sox to bring Grissom back up to the majors when he's fully back from his injury rehab? When I asked earlier, you mentioned that you both expect Grissom back in the majors. Just wondering if that answer has changed. If yes, what would be the expectations for Grissom in what would the expectations for Grissom in AAA be to get back to Boston? What would Valdez or Romy have to do in order to stay up the MLB level? If no, what would Valdez or Romy have to do in order to stay up at the MLB level? Oh, wait, that was the same thing again. Thank you for your email, Andrew. I think that I'll jump on this one. I think that the big wild card here, and it's not someone you really mentioned, is Hamilton. And Valdez has been much better since his promotion back. But I think that with the way the team is currently constructed, having a right-handed platoon option with Hamilton is probably where this is going to end up at second base. And I think that it's probably going to, like, as much as Valdez has been hitting, I don't know if there's a spot for him when everyone is back healthy. And so then it just comes down to, as you said, Romy Gonzalez versus Grissom. And I kind of am leaning more towards, I think that they keep Gonzalez for that spot just because he provides more versatility. Grissom can only play second base. And if he's not going to be the everyday guy, it's tough to carry a second base only guy on your major league roster. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Like, he's going to have to show a little more with the bat to get back in. You mentioned the versatility from some other guys is important, and Grissom's going to play second. So, yeah, I think it's a tough road. They may give him some time back in triple just to hopefully get some confidence back with the bat. And hopefully that's what he does. He just goes and hits and can work his way back slowly. I think that's probably the best case scenario.
Yeah, I agree with that. Next email is from Joe. It's a quick one. Hey guys, I've noticed that when Marcelo Meyer was drafted, one of the first things that we kept hearing was about how good his defense was at shortstop and how he plus potential at the position. Nowadays, however, it feels like we hear people talk about third base with him more and more. A few episodes ago, when discussing the big three, you both mentioned not being confident in his ability to stick it short 4 to 5 years down the line. Is this just a matter of projection with him filling out his frame and having more third base body than he did at 18, or has he had an in-game problem with Ranger footwork or something to that effect? Thank you in advance. Thanks, Joe, for the email. So I think that with Meyer projecting 5 years down the road, like if he can stick at shortstop for 5 years, that's a great outcome. It gets hard. Like you see it all the time. Look at like Manny Machado. Like there's a bunch of guys who you start as a shortstop, and then when you get to your late 20s, you're going to push somewhere else. And I think with Meyer right now, what he's showing is I think he can stick at shortstop. I think he could be, an average, probably a 55 defender there. But you reach a point where, if 4 or 5 down the road, they have a better option there defensively and the bat's still good, you find another place and that usually ends up at third base. So I just think, yeah, as you said, we're projecting out based on, right now he's above average there, but with how guys physically develop, it does become tougher for those guys who aren't necessarily the twitchiest, most fluid, most like, plus runner, plus athlete types to stick there long term.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen him in a year and a half at short since he left Greenville, other than video. But I've always thought he's more than capable. He handles the spot well. He moves well. He gets good reads. It's smooth. It's just, I say I didn't see him. I saw him in spring training, so I don't know what I'm saying. So, yeah, I thought he's always just like smooth, not flashy or super fast, but he just makes the plays. But I think that you'll get that for long enough where it's like, all right, we got what we paid for in the draft with Marcelo Meyer. If he's a really good shortstop for 5 years in the majors, then it's a huge win, in my opinion.
Exactly. That's not a bad thing that if he can only play there for 5 years. Like being a major league shortstop is very difficult. And if they get a major league shortstop for 5 years, the Red Sox will be thrilled. Next email is from Brian. And a question about the need for a right-handed hitter. Hey guys, I listened to the last pod and a viewer question came up about the need for right-handed hitters in the Sox org. My question is as follows. Does it really matter having 7 left-handed hitters in the lineup? The number is accounting for the big three being in the Sox lineup. The majority of starting pitchers in the AL East as well as MLB are right-handed. The left-on-right matchup is up is there. If there's a lefty starter, then you can have your bench players be those right-handed hitters. I just don't see the problem with having your best players being left-handed. They are your best players for a reason, so play them regardless. Would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks, and have a great week. Go Sox, Brian. Thank you, Brian, for the email. And Chris, I'll kick this one to you. What do you think about his statement about playing your best players even if they are all left-handed?
I think it's fine for the most part. It just depends on how bad are the lefties against left-handed arms, and it can really cripple you if you have a bunch of just guys that are incapable. And I don't think that's the complete case here with the Sox. I know currently, as the roster's constructed at the major league level, you have quite a few lefties, and then as you mentioned, you have your top guys in the system. Guess what? They're also left-handed bats, but I don't think that these are guys that are like crippling bad against lefties, where it's like, all right, you cannot put them in against left-handed bats. Yeah, you look, and yes, right now Marcelo Meyer's stats against left-hand is not great, but I'm not writing him off to that yet. He's still really young. I think that all three of the top guys in Anthony, Meyer, and Teal are more than capable of developing into being serviceable against a left-handed arm. And if you can just be serviceable, then it'll play. Obviously, you don't want 9 lefties in the lineup. It's far from ideal to have that as a situation, but you look at Anthony actually has first splits this year, which is interesting, hitting 325 against lefties.
Yeah, Anthony's always been good against lefties. That's not, and I don't have worries about Teal. It's Myers, the one of those three that I have the biggest concerns because he's just never hit lefties really. And I think the tricky part and why you just don't see teams like to have that is you can't do line changes in game with like 4 players. That's just not feasible because you have to keep guys on the bench just in case you have whatever, situations happen later in the game. And so it's just about, you want to put yourself in a position, the best possible position to succeed. And it's just tough, when you're that left-handed. You expose yourself especially against teams that, they can, and might not matter against a starter, but what you are seeing a lot these days is teams are going to run an opener and then just bring in a bulk guy who's a lefty or vice versa. They'll start a lefty. Like you can't be making those changes in the second inning. If, they're starting a lefty, you get a lefty opener and then you switch to a righty or vice versa. So I think that you want to have more balance. It's not ideal to be a 7-2 split. And especially when, if you're looking at it like Abreu doesn't really hit lefties. Hamilton's not the best against them. Like there will be multiple positions where you kind of want to platoon. And I don't think the Red Sox would want to construct a roster in that way where you're beholden to having kind of platoon options at multiple positions. I think it makes more sense to go out and try and find players that allow you to maximize your lineup with the best possible talent against guys from both sides of the plate. I think we got one more email. Oh no, 2 more. Sorry. This is a really quick one. It's from Sparky, and the question is, what's going on with Nicholas Giudice? Is he hurt? Is he going through a mechanical adjustment? Why isn't he debuted this year? He was just placed on the DL, or IL, excuse me, since last time we recorded. So that's why he's not playing. And then the next one is just, would you trade Luis Perales, Cooper Criswell, Josh Winkowski, Richard Fitz, Ovis Portez, and Brian Mata for Garrett Crochet? Yeah, of course you would, but the White Sox would laugh at you. So you're not getting Crochet if you're not giving up probably 2 of Anthony, Meyer, and Teal. And I just don't think that makes sense for the Red Sox with where they're at in a kind of a building perspective. But thank you for the question, Sparky. And then our final email is from Ethan Barry. And his question is couple of big league questions. The last couple of years, the Sox have looked good in a similar point in the year. Why should we believe this year is different? Out of the young players currently outperforming their scouting report, who is most sustainable in the futures, and who seems the most likely to be sustainable moving forward versus who are you not buying and has changed their long-term projections? So, Ethan, you probably have enjoyed the beginning of this episode because we hit on both of those things there. But I guess just one player we didn't talk about, the reason I read that we didn't talk about earlier that I wanted to bring up was Connor Wong. And I guess since Ethan asked, let's kind of do the same exercise. Where are you at on Connor Wong in terms of sustainability? Do you think that where he's been probably one of the top, 5 or so catchers in all of baseball is sustainable? Or is he, are you still more in like or even everyday camp, or are you still more like he's probably more like a platoon backup type?
Yeah, I think he's probably more of a platoon type, which It may actually work great in early part of Kyle Teal's career, where, obviously you can put Wong in there against lefties and, Teal against righties and just ease him in. Like Teal's going to be a great major league catcher for a long time, but, if you don't want to stunt the development, I guess, and kill his confidence early on. So I think Wong is serviceable enough. I'm not sure he's going to consistently do what he's doing, obviously hitting 330 this year with 7 home runs and just 223 plate appearances has been incredible. Don't expect that to sustain, but I do like Wong. I think he fits the roster for the foreseeable future and could be really solid. But I think that maybe in the stance where he spells Teal some days, gives him some rest. You could even put Teal in, DH spot the days that Wong's behind the plate. And I think it's good for both parties. I think it benefits them both in a tremendous way long term to kind of go by that model.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. And I think that the two reasons that I still think of Wong kind of more as a backup platoon type is that number one is his defense is actually not that great, especially metrically, other than his pop times. Like he's in the lowest possible tier for blocks above average. Same with framing. So the TrackMan does not love his defense. Offensively, he's been obviously insane this year, and I think that for a catcher, he actually still, I even think if he's using a bench role, he's still got above average potential. Because like if you're hitting 260 as a catcher, that's insanely good production. But if you look at it kind of his splits, the thing that I think is more sustainable is against left-handed hitters. He just seems to, or left-handed pitching, excuse me. He just seems to see the ball much better against them. Like 79 plate appearances series, 10 walks, 14 strikeouts, and 144 plate appearances against righties. He's got 28 strikeouts and 4 walks. I just think what he's doing against lefties is a lot more sustainable than what he is doing against righties, because I do think that he's someone who's kind of more like a platoony catcher. But I completely agree. Him and Kyle Teal is like a perfect pairing. And I think that's kind of what the Red Sox are setting up for, probably, starting at some point, maybe next year going into 2026. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. And thank you all for listening. Of course, thank you to our podcast producer, Daniel Fox, who is currently away somewhere. But he'll be back soon enough, and wanted to give him a shout out.
Yeah, don't thank the guy who's actually producing, Ian. It's okay. I still love you, though.
As always, you can follow the site on social media at Sox Prospects. You can follow me at Ian Cundall, IANCUNDALL. And Chris, where can people follow you and all of your work?
Find me on Twitter at RotoClegg, CLEGG, and DynastyDugout.com.
Dynasty Dugout's great if you're into the fantasy baseball side of things, especially. A lot of great content there to help you dominate your leagues. I think is that what we're going with? Dominate or win your leagues? And also thank you to the Ludlow Thieves for our intro and outro music. You can find their stuff wherever you get your tunes. And of course, thank you to all of our supporters on patreon.com/Sox Prospects. This episode, we want to shout out Jason Stonebrunner, Grayson Sinner, Stephen G. Shaw, Jason Parker, Mike Granger, Jeff Richardson, Dan Gillen, Paul Manish, James P. McMahon, and Jim Tuttle. Thank you as always for your support, and we'll be back with more of the web's best coverage of the Red Sox organization soon, so keep your ears to the feed. Thanks for listening, everyone.